All right. Good afternoon, everyone. It is about 2 p.m., so I think we will go ahead and get started. Um, Welcome to Makerspace Leadership in Transition, Service Continuity and Quality During Periods of Considerable Change. I am Adam Johnson from Coastal Carolina University. I am the Learning Technologies and Data Librarian at Coastal, and I'm going into my third year this year at Coastal. How time flies when you're having fun. And I will go ahead and turn it over to my co-presenters to introduce themselves as well. We'll work our way up the list since I'm at the bottom there. We'll go with Eric next and then last to Joe.
Right. Thanks, Adam. Good afternoon. I am Eric Resnis. I am the head of research and scholarship at Coastal. So the Makerspace is one of the areas that is within this department. And I have been at Coastal now for about 7 years.
Hi, everybody. I'm Joe. Can everybody hear me okay? Pretty good. Yeah, so I am the Makerspace and Creative Technologies librarian at Coastal Carolina University. I have kind of an odd tenure. I was at Coastal for 8 years as a staff member and then left, and now I am back. And I've been back at Coastal and working in the Makerspace and leading the team of students here since March.
Excellent. All right, so we'll just go ahead and jump on into our presentation. Before we begin and talk specifically about the Makerspace, just to cover a few brief things about Coastal Carolina University for those of you who have never heard of us. We are a public 4-year comprehensive university in Conway, South Carolina. That is in the Myrtle Beach metro area, about 15 minutes or so away from Myrtle Beach. Um, we are just recently got reclassified in the Carnegie classification round that came out, I believe, in April as a research college and university. And we are working our way up. We're very close to R2 status. So that means typically a focus on undergraduate education. We have about 11,000 students, and I'd say 90% of those, probably maybe 85, are undergrads. And that is our main focus. But we do have growing master's and doctoral programs as well. So that's about where we are. We are in a high growth moment in our institutional history.
All right, and a bit about our library system at Coastal. And so we are in the middle of growth for the libraries. Actually, it is more right sizing because we have been undersized facility considering the amount of students and the traffic that we have. And so our featured building is Thompson Library, which is where the new makerspace is located, and that just opened about a year ago. Um, and what is housed in Thompson Library is most of the library services, student success partners are also here, and student computing services, and also Starbucks. Kimball Library, which is adjacent but not directly connected to Thompson, is currently under renovation and should be completed hopefully early next year. When Kimball opens, it'll have quiet study space. Thompson is a very vibrant space, but Kimball will also have special collections and archives and our collections staff, in addition to the Office of Undergraduate Research. And then Bryan Information Commons, which is connected to Kimball Library, that has mostly study space, both collaborative and quiet study space with reservable study rooms. And then we also have East Campus offsite storage. So the vast majority, and I mean over 99% of our print collections are not in our physical buildings. They are in storage on East Campus, and we go a few times a day to retrieve requested items. Let's talk a bit about the move to Thompson Library. So before last summer, there was a smaller makerspace that was located in Kimball Library, and it was established. We were planning right during COVID and opened up actually a few years later. And so it was in a converted instruction room. So it was not planned as a makerspace, but that was the best room that suited us and had the best visibility at the time. Unfortunately, it's located far at the back of the library, and was not always visible to students. At the beginning, we had some basic 3D printers, both Ultimaker and Creality 3D printers. We also had a large format printer, and Glowforge were the primary technologies that we had. But because the space was only 1,000 square feet, we were not able to expand services at that time. Holding events was a struggle. We had to share open space, open study space outside of the room oftentimes, and classes were even more of a struggle. The office space next door was added to help with classroom, but still that did not create an ideal space for learning. Additionally, upstairs at Kimball, we ran a pilot podcasting studio in an old study room to test what we were going to do for the move. And so once we knew that that Thompson Library is going to have a new and expanded makerspace, we were able to say, okay, here's all the things that we don't like about the Kimball Library space, and here are all the things that we want to do in the new space. And we had that plan going, and we were just ready to implement it. And then our Makerspace Manager unexpectedly left in June of 2024 for a new position. And so but that meant that a lot of those duties in executing that move fell to those that were still remaining. And indeed, the manager departed in late June, and the move happened 2 weeks later. So we were on our feet quickly.
Okay, so I'll talk a little bit about the new makerspace in the new Thompson Library. As you can see, it's 1,900 square feet, which is double the size of the old makerspace. The old space was about 1,000 square feet. With double the size, we have more space for newer technologies, and we also have that expanded space to have groups in and have classes in. We have regular craft nights. We can bring in entire classes to come and do a making project. Or we can accommodate large groups too, student groups. We've expanded the technologies in this space as well, whereas Eric mentioned, we had a few 3D printers and some large format printers. Now we've got a little bit more to play with. We have a F2100 direct-to-garment printer, so folks can print their own t-shirts, bags, whatever they like. In conjunction with that, we also have a Sawgrass dye sublimation printer in case anyone's working with synthetics and they want to add graphics or logos onto something. We have resin printers in the space. We have about 4 of them, SL1s. They've been very popular among students. We have the new Bamboo, well, new then, P1S. Now they have the AMS feed systems on them. And those are extremely popular with students and have really kind of expanded access to 3D printing, with their user friendliness. We also have a Modix extremely large format printer. It's a 120X. Prints about 3 foot by 4 foot. I am still working on it. We're hoping to have it fully operational by the start of this semester so that we can maybe do some big projects or something really fun with the students in the space. And as Eric said, they had a pilot podcast studio, but now it's expanded even further. There are 2 dedicated podcasting rooms in the Thompson Library with Rodecaster boards and 4 mics in room 2, 2 mics in room 1, and as well as there are Marantz turrets that students can check out if they want to do audio and video. We also have data visualization and VR lab. Adam and Eric have been working with those extensively, which Eric, if you guys want to speak to any of those things, we'll probably get into that as well. But doing a lot of VR for biology labs, for anatomy and physiology classes, and getting into those areas where you can't normally during a lecture, right? Being able to visualize. Also, we have a one-button studio that we are currently working on. It is in development now, and we're hopeful to have it up soon. But the big thing here in the makerspace as well is its location, right? This space was designed specifically as a makerspace, right? And dedicated to be at the forefront of entrance to the library, so it cannot be missed. There's a giant glass curtain wall. You can see all the way into the space. We are right next to the Starbucks, so while people are waiting on their coffee, They're usually watching 3D printers run, or they're watching us run around putting things together. And so that increased visibility also leads to increased traffic. And we'll go ahead and turn it over to the next slide.
I believe that's me.
Mm-hmm.
I will add really quickly, just to kind of jump back to that slide. One of the things that I think is so great about this makerspace, and one of the things that has allowed us to kind of be more flexible with the technology we bring in, is the configuration. It was purpose built as a makerspace, so you can see in some of these pictures, you can see we've got outlets that drop from the ceiling. We've got floor outlets. We've got movable shelving. So we can really reconfigure this for almost any kind of event or program. So big fan of the layout there. Just wanted to point that out. And in terms of the data visualization and VR lab, we didn't include any pictures, I realize, but to give you a sense of what's in that space, it is one space. It has tables, so it's got some work areas. It also has boundary markers that we've placed on the floor. We've got tethered VR headsets. We have 3 MetaQuest 3 and 1 Meta Pro. We also have 3 castable monitors on one big wall and one on another wall that you can cast using Air Media or HDMI plug into. And then there's also one monitor outside the space. So students who come into that space can also use that for just kind of general data visualization needs if they're working with Tableau or Excel, those kinds of things. We have graduate students who do that a lot, maybe some advanced undergrads in certain disciplines, ArcGIS. Those are the kind of things we have envisioned for that space. But then we also have, as Joe mentioned, the apps on the VR headsets that are being used right now, mainly in course integrated kind of instruction. So the molecular visualization app, we have NanoMe. We also are introducing some virtual dissection apps. We have some faculty who are doing immersive video, so like YouTube 3D, those kinds of things. So there's a lot of potential there. That's definitely growing and a new part of our portfolio, but we're growing that out. And just to kind of give you a sense of where we started to where we are now, I'll briefly touch on kind of our old management model, and then how Eric and I kind of adopted in the interim, and then I'll have Eric discuss the sort of shared model that we ended up with, just so you get a sense of how that works. So previously, back in Kimball in our old space, we had a centralized model, which was a Makerspace Manager model. That's probably familiar to a lot of you. We had a non-credentialed librarian, full-time staff member. So this person was not a librarian, did not have a background in libraries, and they managed the day-to-day of the Makerspace as an instructional lab. So they handled staffing, they handled machine maintenance, they handled all of the sort of day-to-day requests for using the space, and instruction was kind of dealt with separately. So if there was a course integrated instruction, and it involved information literacy or any kind of deeper research, then a librarian was brought in. And that's one of the reasons that I started my role at Coastal. I was that person. I was the librarian that worked very closely with the Makerspace Manager, but I did not have any direct management of the space. So that one person was in charge of the whole space. Now, after the Makerspace Manager left, we transitioned to a shared model of governance there. So the head of research and scholarship, which is Eric, basically managed the functions of the lab. So the students, the day-to-day, and the general instructional requests, handling materials requests, all of those things that fell on Eric. And then the learning technologies librarian, I took the lead on hiring our student workers. Also a lot of course integrated instruction as well. I also helped revamp our workshops, which we'll get into a little bit later. And then I maintained my supervision of the VR and data viz programming and the data viz studio. So all of that stuff stayed with me, but you can kind of see how we decided to take all of the functions that the manager would have kind of done in this old model and divided them based on interest and areas of emphasis. So, yeah. And I'll turn it over to Eric so he can discuss the shared model where we ended up.
All right. So going forward, we are continuing with a shared model for several reasons. We learned that having one person as the manager can cause single point of failure. We wanted to make sure that that wasn't a possibility going forward. But the reality now is that the Makerspace and Creative Technology Librarian is a faculty position, and it's nearly impossible to manage a space that is open 5.5 days a week and still be able to do faculty type duties. And so how we've decided to share duties going forward, which we will continually evaluate and change as necessary, is Joe's position will do the day-to-day, the student supervision, and oversee the studios, but Adam and I will be available for backup day-to-day. So if Joe's not there, or Joe has to work on other duties as part of his portfolio, we will be able to manage the space in that capacity. We will all share instruction in the spaces and bring in liaison librarians as appropriate, as we have done in the past. And then other things that might be specific to us. One is I'm going to continue doing item budget and procurement. So for any of you that have bought things at a college or university, you know that can be a process. At a state university, it can be a daunting process. And it's taken me 2.5 years to finally figure out how South Carolina rules work so that we can be efficient with that. So it makes sense for me to continue doing that. Adam will continue overseeing VR Data Viz facilities as well.
Okay, and then we've also got to consider our customer service model as well. Under the old rules in the old Makerspace, it was very strict, extremely strict, almost exclusionary. People would come in, they would want to talk about doing something or learn how to do something, and it required them to take a workshop immediately out of the gate, right? And that was kind of the knee-jerk response, oh, I want to 3D print something. Well, have you taken the workshop? Right? No, well, no, you got to take the workshop before you can do anything. And what that leads to, as I'm sure you folks know, is that people will come in, they'll find out they have to take a long workshop, an hour-long workshop, but still seems long. And then they'll like, okay, well, I'll sign up for it. And then they leave, and then you never ever see them again. Right. And we don't want them to come away with that kind of rejected sort of experience, or to make them feel like we weren't willing to listen to their concerns. And so we've gone for more of a reference style model, right? Like we want to find out where they are, right? What exactly are we looking for here when we come into this space? Are you interested in some folks just want to print a thing, right? They want to come in, they've got a 3D file, they want to print it, and they're good, right? They're not wanting to get into the nuts and bolts of it. They just need a little bit of help, right? And so we've kind of relaxed those rules a bit so that people can come in and do that, right? Now we will help a little bit here and there with the file type, or adjustments that they need to make on whatever it is they're wanting to make. But we'll kind of guide them, and then if they're really into it, then we go with the workshop model and say, hey, if you really enjoyed this, you should consider taking a workshop. I think you'd get a lot out of it, and you'd be able to come in and use the machines without us, having to supervise you quite as much. So that's where we've started, and we're trying to get staff in the Makerspace, student staff, to meet students and faculty where they are, right? Again, what are they looking for? Are we just looking for something brief? Are we looking for more in-depth instruction? Is there an instruction opportunity here, right? To ask those who, what, where, when, how, why questions that we need to ask, so that we know exactly what our patrons are looking for, and so that we can meet them in that space rather than forcing them to come directly to us. And in doing so, right, we want to try to create a welcoming and as you can see, non-intimidating atmosphere. Human nature is, when you are confronted with something unknown, you stop and you pause. Right. The thing that I hear most out of people who come in to visit the Makerspace, right, they're I don't want to break anything. I'm worried I might break something. They're a little apprehensive about the new technology if it's unfamiliar to them, right? And so part of that customer service model is letting people know that they are welcome there, that we're glad that they're there, that we're genuinely interested in what it is that they want to create, to try to put them at ease and take away some of that intimidation, right? And also explain the technology as well. We want to be flexible again, whereas we were really rigid before. There's only one way to do this. You have to follow this model. It doesn't work that way in real life. It might look nice on paper, but in real life, it's a bit messier, right? There's multiple ways to accomplish a task. If a person wants to put a logo on a coffee mug, right, we're going to use dye sublimation, and we're going to use the sawgrass, right? But there's different ways to manipulate the file to get it right. There's different steps that need to be taken to help them, and we have to have that flexibility to help them along, right? And increase in experimentation too. We don't know the answers to everything, right? We are good at making stuff, but we are not perfect. And so there has to be the ability for user input as well. Well, I think we should try this. Okay, well, let's experiment with that and see where it goes. Also with student faculty groups as well, right? Doing small projects for them so that they can get interested in the space, right? And being able to kind of work with them, again, where they are and where they're coming from. And we'll go ahead and go over to the next slide. And again, this goes to being welcome and open to new users, right? And working on that service excellence. And service excellence is something we see here at Coastal that you may not see at other places, but I guarantee, or it may not be that name, but I guarantee you've probably had it in training, which is putting yourself in the place of the person coming into the space, right? Providing, good care and diligence in helping them with their project or explaining things to them, right? And practicing good habits in, making them feel acknowledged. If somebody comes into the space, you acknowledge them. You don't just, right, not pay them any attention. The old 5 foot, 10 foot rule, right? If you're 10 feet away and you make eye contact, wave, say hello, or acknowledge them. And then if they're 5 feet from you, actually speak to them, right? And that goes into, making folks feel welcome in the space. And it's extremely important in overcoming that apprehension. Again, the new technologies that we have in the space too, we had some goals there where we needed to get them up and moving. And the bamboo, the Prusa printers, those are all brand new in the space. We didn't have those before. Sawgrass dye sublimation. The direct-to-garment printer has a very steep learning curve to it. And Eric and Adam can speak to that. They definitely were a big part in setting all of that stuff up. I had not even yet arrived when those technologies were introduced into the space, and they spent a good bit of time putting those together and getting the models up and running for them. And then we also have the long-term projects. We have the Trotex PD400 laser cutter. It's a massive laser cutter, good for industrial applications, whereas we had just glow forges. That wasn't up and running yet. We had to go ahead and get that commissioned, get in touch with Trotec, get representatives down here to get us going on that. And then, as I talked about before, the Modix as well, the large-scale 3D printer. That's a kit printer, and it had to be put together. Students put it together, but there's a lot of programming that went into it that needed to be adjusted. And so part of, that was one of our major goals, to at least get that up and moving before the start of the semester. And Eric or Adam, if you guys want to add anything into about the bamboo or the sawgrass or the DTG, feel free.
I will briefly kind of say, with the sawgrass and the bamboo, I know Eric was involved with our previous Makerspace Manager in deciding some of these pieces of tech, but we really kind of foresaw the need with the bamboo and with the AMS, so having the multiple filaments at the same time. We knew that students would want that. That was one of those things where we had a little bit of anticipation in terms of where we saw things going, in our own sort of limitation with what we had been able to do with the Ultimakers. We just realized long term that there would be a need. So that's one thing that we really worked on. And the Prusas, those of you who have worked with the Prusa printers before know that they are great for doing those kind of fast projects. Students really like the open bed. It's a very user-friendly design. So we wanted to have as much as we could in that space to be approachable. So the goal was to kind of have not just, I mean, it sounds silly to say showpieces, but the fact that the front was all glass, you want people to be able to look in and see what's going on and get excited about the creative energy in the space. So that's part of our intentionality behind purchasing that stuff. Um, Joe, I noticed, didn't mention the Cocoa Press, probably deliberately. But the Cocoa Press was also another idea where we wanted to do something a little different. I don't know if you guys have seen those. It's essentially the same concept as a regular filament 3D printer. It's just with a core of chocolate that melts and prints into shape. Um, we have had some issues implementing that on a larger scale just because it's chocolate, it's messy, it's a food product, so you have to worry about sanitation and how you're storing things and who has access to it. But even still, we have been able to use it in certain programs. Like we did a Valentine's Day, like make your own chocolate kind of thing. And we had some molds that we made with the vacuum former, and students could melt chocolate and put it into their custom molds. And then we also brought out the Cocoa Press for that, but we kind of had pre-printed designs, and then people could take that chocolate. We didn't actually have them 3D print custom things. So we've been able to use it in a few sort of limited applications, and I think it's fun to get people thinking about the process of 3D printing, but it's not something that I think we would use on a daily basis by any particular stretch of the imagination, just because it's there's a lot of logistical challenges in doing that. But again, we do see it as a valuable instructional tool. Um, Sublimation and direct-to-garment printing, those are both completely new for us, but we have had so much interest, especially from student organizations, about working with textiles. So printing onto t-shirts, doing a club quilt or blanket, those kinds of things. So that's why we got into those applications, and usage on those. It was slow at first because it took us a little bit of time to get them implemented and ready and get students kind of cross-trained on them. But I would say now, like spring, we saw a massive uptick in usage in those things, especially with organizations requesting things. So, yeah, I think we did a really good job anticipating what the needs and wants would be, and who our customers would be. But that's why we kind of made those decisions we made during that transition. And Eric, do you have anything to add on that?
I do, yes. So I will say the Cocoa Press is my baby. That was the one machine I advocated for very late in the game, but that was envisioned as a Hallmark machine. And so I think from my sense, I think we have two types of machines in our makerspace. The one, which we have the vast majority of, are the easy to get to learn, low barrier to use that gets students excited about making. And that's part of the reason that we bought the direct-to-garment printer, because we saw the potential in that. And then we have the Hallmark machines. So these aren't as easy to use, but they lend visibility. And for the more advanced user, that gets them very excited. And the Trotec is a perfect example of that. It takes a little more work to get to use, but there's so much more that you can do once you know how to use it. Modix is its own thing in that we wanted something where we could print very large items, because one of the projects we've been working on for, I think we're entering our 5th year now, is a skull project with the biology department. And we've been a bit limited on the size of skulls that we could print. And so that increased that capacity. All right.
Okay.
So I'm going to talk a bit about student supervision model and how that changed and evolved during this transition. And I do want to say that all the things you see here weren't completely new and implemented at fall semester of 24, but some things did exist, some things evolved, and some things changed depending on the way we wanted to operate going forward. And so the first thing was something that was done before and that the students continued wanting to do. And this was a weekly all hands meeting. And so finding one time where all 15 students are available is a challenge, but we were able to make it work. And so during those meetings, Students each talk about what they've been working on, projects they helped with, what they're learning personally in the space in the past week. And then it's also a time for general announcements, general sharing, and also training each other as time allows. We were able to use that as a time for the newer technologies where some of our leading students had taken the initiative to learn. They were able to teach the other students how to use the technology. Direct student to student training. Something that had been done previously is empowering students. But the one thing that happened when, especially me in the space, most of the days, I know these technologies to a certain level. I did not know any of them in depth. I learned a lot, but the students soon learn that, well, it doesn't pay just to come ask Eric, well, how does this work? How does that work? We really turned it into, well, let's figure this out together. Or what do you think? What does your colleague student think who knows the technology a lot more in depth than you? So really empowering them to think that way and to ask each other, not just relying on us as authorities to answer the question for them. Also, student-initiated problem solving. We wanted them to help solve problems for those that came in for each other and also those that came into the makerspace. And that, occasionally if things went awry, that was okay. We could always have a follow-up afterwards and say, well, next time we might do this a little bit differently. Promotion was key, and we had two levels of students, an associate, which is the entry level, and then a technician, which has more advanced expectations, but students had not been promoted previously due to how the positions were structured. So one of the things that I did was I collapsed the expectations for the technician. And main things I were looking for was one, does the student have a wide knowledge of of the technologies in the makerspace? Two, is the student have propensity for quality customer service and for also training their fellow students? And then three, how I put this, how helpful can they be in helping the makerspace reach its goals? And so with that in mind, I immediately promoted four at the beginning of fall semester and then a fifth in the spring semester. And so those students also helped lead. They provided suggestions. They were part of helping to lead the other students that were not technicians. And as Joe mentioned before, we rethought how we did things. Before someone came into this space, and usually I could see the students the first question is, okay, you want to use this technology, have you taken the certification workshop? And then if the answer is no, well, you have to do it. And while that's an easy script to follow, because there are so many different ways that a user could come in this space and knowledge that they bring with them, that didn't really lend to a positive experience with the space. And so it was really getting them to think broadly and using a problem-solving mindset so that when someone came in, okay, they haven't taken the workshop. Well, do they know how to use this technology? What is their goal with the technology? Because while we love students who want to learn the technologies in depth, we acknowledge that not all students want to, and some just have a cool thing they want to print and they want some help to get it printed, and then they're good and on their way. So we want to make sure that we could foster that type of student. And that goes to the reference model of patron assistance that Joe mentioned earlier. The last thing that we piloted in spring semester was to do small production jobs for departments and student organizations. And that was something that we thought about very carefully because that can become a slippery slope. But what we saw was that for groups that wanted to do small production jobs, if they didn't have someone that they could immediately give us to learn about the technologies, they may not when they may have not completed their request with us. And so I thought that completing small production jobs, okay, it helps us become seen as a partner on campus. And it also gives the students more practice with the skills. And so one of the first projects we did was a t-shirt job for the philosophy department where we made 64 t-shirts using the direct-to-garment printer. And how I structure that is, in addition to materials, I give them a cost estimate as to how much student time it will take to complete the project, and then I charge the department the hourly rate for students. And we have completed several projects at this point, and we've only received high praise for the items that we have completed.
All right. Eric kind of touched on some of these changes where we were talking about workshops and this idea of, if someone comes in, we were asking them, well, have you taken the certification workshop? Are you certified to use this? You may just want to 3D print a little keychain or a bookmark, but are you certified? Do you know how to use all the ins and outs of the machine? That was our initial model back in the old Kimball makerspace. So it was really rigid. It did work, I would say, when the space was new and we knew no one knew the technology. So back in the 2020 days. But we decided really quickly that that wasn't going to work in this new space, this new configuration, just because we want to be able to incorporate the previous learning and knowledge of users. Most people, even if they haven't 3D printed before, know what printing is, right? They are familiar with the concept. So we really wanted to try to meet students where they were with their sort of level of knowledge, level of expertise, and get them involved in making at the point of creation where we could. So whether that means if it's a small job, just kind of showing them the ins and outs really quickly and getting them comfortable on the machine, getting them ready to learn more. Whether that means, having staff cross-trained, which is one of the things that we'll do, and I'll cover that really briefly. So I don't know how it works at everyone else's makerspace, but in general, in our library, the previous, I would say, iteration of the makerspace had student technicians who were pros in, let's say, one area. They had their niche area. So we had one or two who were really great at 3D printing, one or two who were super great at sewing or embroidery. We had somebody who was the large format printing person or the podcasting person. So we had people who had their little niches, but they didn't necessarily leave their corners. So we knew coming into the makerspace and knowing that we wanted to change this workshop model to make the tech more accessible, that we wanted our students to have a deeper well of knowledge to draw on. So one thing that Eric and I encouraged early on before Joe arrived was to kind of promote that idea of cross training. So at those weekly all hands meetings, we would invite students to share what they were working on in terms of a project and to have a goal for learning a new piece of tech they hadn't learned. And that really served us well. We also got students who we knew were really well trained or experts in a certain kind of tech to train other students in kind of a mentoring model. So if we had one student who knew how to use 3D CAD really well, we would encourage that student to teach some of the newer student workers 3D CAD so that they would get confident in that tech. So the more we kind of built that repertoire of knowledge, the more we felt comfortable transitioning over to a less rigid certification model to a more on-demand model. And how that tends to work now, it's one of two ways. We will get students who come in and say, I need to 3D print for a class and I don't know what I'm doing. Can you help me? And then we can kind of help them at point of access. Or we will get students who will reach out to us through our website and say, I really want to learn 3D printing. Can I come in? So we'll have a request for a workshop. And that's what we really mean by on-demand models. Previously, we had scheduled workshops where we had them at a set time every week. You knew on Sundays at 2 p.m. there was going to be a sewing workshop. You knew every other Thursday there would be 3D printing, right? We wanted to make it more accessible for students. So we moved to a more demand-based model of requesting that stuff. And we wanted to be more patron service oriented in that approach. The workshops themselves also changed in that they were tailored to patron interests. So previously, for the sewing workshop, we had someone sew a face mask, I think, was the final product, and everybody got the same final product. Now, if someone takes machine sewing and they've learned ink stitch, then they can design their own pattern to sew in ink stitch, for example. For 3D printing, they can go into Thingiverse or wherever and find a template and print based off that template. So we've really tried to gear it more into the patron interest rather than having them produce a set final product that we can kind of evaluate like we're grading it. And that has worked really well for us as well. And then the peer-to-peer training, I've already kind of touched on, but this idea that someone comes in point of service, wants help, and we can kind of help them right there with the basics rather than worrying about scheduling them for a long formalized workshop, which we still have. We still do have those workshops and we can still give certifications. But as I said, it's more on a demand basis than a sort of rigid requirement for having anyone come in and use the tech. So that was a really big, I think, a sea change for us in how we approach the space and how we work to make it approachable and accessible for our students.
Okay, so we've looked at a lot of space and managing the space with regard to patrons and their interactions in the space and what they can do. We haven't really touched much on student workers and bringing in. They've had two transitions to deal with, right? The Makerspace Manager left. Those students that were coming back, Adam and Eric were running things, right? And so there was a change in the model as we've seen. And then they brought me in this past March. And so that's yet another transition that they've had to deal with, right? And when working with the student workers, the one thing I know from working with students for years is make changes gradually. You can't just come into the space, especially one where students are invested in making decisions in that space, especially when they have some ownership, some stake in the game. You can't just come in and change everything and move stuff around. You'll alienate them, right? So if you're going to make changes to the space or changes that you see, and if you went to Joy's presentation yesterday, you'll hear a lot of overlap here. You have to make your changes gradually, right? And you have to be there with the student, right? As that change, right? And they start as suggestions, right? Have you tried this? Well, what's your approach to, say, working with this type of model on the 3D printer, right? You're having trouble with the Ultimakers. Maybe we just need to clean them. When was the last time we did that, right? Ask questions, solicit feedback from them, have them active in the participation, right? And one of the things I noticed when we came in, the students had a pretty negative opinion of the Ultimakers. And really, through that question and answer, right? Talking it through, looking at it, let's try some things. We cleaned them up a little bit. We recalibrated them, right? We cleaned the plates so that they weren't, so slippery. And lo and behold, they started to work. So, working with the student on their level, right? We're able to affect a change. We're able to teach them something about the machine without having to really shake things up, right? Because we're doing it together. It's an exploration, right? And they change their opinion about a technology, right? That they may not have fully understood before, right? And as you're doing this, right, we're providing guidance and encouragement, and that's going to be really big if you have to make a change in the space, because you have to win their trust. Right? You're coming in, they're not going to trust you immediately. They don't know you. So through working beside them, working with them, right? Providing just nudges here and there, right? Providing explanations for why you're doing things, right? you're able to gain some trust, hopefully. And if you are, then keep pushing it, right? Celebrate success is a huge one for me. If a student figures something out, I have a student, Zach, who taught himself how to sew, right? With the machine. He made a bag the very next day, right? Blow that up, right? Zach, holy crap. Like, I'm amazed. Like, how did you do that, right? Show me how to do that too. And that's another part of it too, if you're coming in, right? Be willing to accept training yourself as the librarian coming into the space with the Makerspace Manager, right? Show me what you know. I don't know how all of this works. I know how some of it works. I'm really good at some things. I'm not so great at others, right? And being able to admit that is a huge part to getting on the student's level. So it's just some things that I would suggest doing if we were learning that or taking over a space or moving into a new space. Again, patron service. Teaching the students to be service oriented with the patrons, right? Somebody comes through the door, acknowledge them, right? We have our basic technologies ready on day one. The most popular things in our space are 3D printing, laser cutting, sewing. Those are the big three. Large format printing, we get a lot of that, but that's typically academic posters, but still, that has to be up and running and ready to go too, right? So teaching students to, look for preventative maintenance on those things, keep up with the maintenance schedule on them, and making sure they're good and trained on it. Adam talked about flexibility with the workshops. That was another thing that we changed, and we're getting students to change as well. We had signups before and nobody would sign up, or people would sign up for the workshop and then not show up. Right. With the requested workshop, that's typically folks who are really interested in the space, and we're seeing a lot higher attendance with those moving to that model. And again, working with the students, right, we're trying to accommodate the users as best as possible. Again, meet them where they are, right, and be interested in what they're interested in. And we'll go ahead and move on to the next slide.
All right. I know we're running a little low on time. So if I want to talk about this briefly, but you can always reach out to me if you have more questions. So we mentioned before that the Makerspace Manager was a staff position. However, given the way pay bands are structured in the state of South Carolina, we were very limited as to how we could structure that position, the pay we could offer, flexibility we could offer. And so with this transition, we decided to make this a faculty position. Several reasons for that. One was to lend more flexibility, to allow additional incentives such as promotion and tenure, shared governance, but also the manager had been contributing to scholarship and service. And so it made sense that we would combine this all in a faculty position and move it one that is more similar to the rest of the department, which are all librarian faculty positions.
All right. And again, really briefly, some things that we learned by experience through unexpected departures and dealing with that. Just some pieces of advice to share with you all. As you are running your makerspace, keep documentation. Those things you think of that you think you know every day, those account login information stuff, passwords, user manuals, procedures for all your equipment. For us, number one, I would say that running task list of what you do daily, weekly, monthly, and by semester, or even annually, that's really important. And centralize that. Put that in somewhere like Teams or a shared folder, a shared drive, so that everyone can access it if you're not there anymore. Ensure every relevant party has access to that, including your library or department admins as well, and students. Because if a student needs to handle machine maintenance in your absence, they may need that documentation. Create a shared inbox. We made one called Makerspace at coastal.edu. Everybody can access it now. So all of our requests are coming to one centralized space. We know exactly what's going on. We know who's requested a workshop when. It's been very helpful. And then last but not least, make sure you generalize those accounts where possible. So make sure you use that Makerspace at coastal.edu address with your vendors, with app stores, those kinds of things, so that it's not that hard to retrace your steps if someone needs to, say, recover a password or get your username.
My apologies. I didn't realize I was muted. So, like we talked about before, right, we want to make changes without negatively impacting the space. Again, meeting students where they are, working side by side with students. If we make changes, we do them carefully and we scaffold them, do them gradually. We want to explain why we're doing a thing. We don't just want to do a thing, right? Especially if the students have had ownership of the space for a good while. They need to know why. It's just as much, it is their space. We're really just there kind of helping it along. Always offer options for your users, right? Again, the more people you can bring in, the more you can connect with people, the better experience you're going to have. Students, always be open to their concerns. They will have concerns. You need to foster that two-way street so that they trust you, right? And can bring information to you that might be relevant to the space. Nothing's going to be perfect. There will be failures. There will be catastrophic failures. And it's okay. That's okay. Things are going to fail. We are doing this gradually, and we'll learn, right? And we'll learn something from those failures, and then we'll move forward. Nothing will ever be perfect. Students can sometimes get very bound up on something having to be a certain way, and sometimes managers can. Don't wait for perfection. It's not going to be perfect. Keep rolling. Also, on the leadership style, I have authoritative over authoritarian. Sometimes, authoritarian takes over. I'm in charge. I'm doing this. Authoritative is more the I'm here to support and empower you. How can I help you? Right? It's a little bit of servant leadership in there, but also I know a few things. I'm happy to provide that support for you, right? That knowledge base for you, or at least help you get access to that knowledge. And we're going. So,
All right. So we did miss a few things because when you prioritize, things fall by the wayside. And so one of the biggest for us was machine maintenance. That did not happen on the normal schedule. And it did start to impact us towards January, February, when we did have a few more problems with the machine. So that was something we'd do differently. The other thing we had to do was for some of the technologies where we didn't have capacity, we just said those are going to have to wait. One was a CNC mill, the other was an industrial sewing machine. And so those we did, if there was interest, we said, hey, wait until we're ready to offer workshops on that. Then additionally, in-depth training, lots of training happened for students peer-to-peer, but 3-4 hour sessions where we talk about something truly in-depth, those really didn't happen during the transition. And I should say some material safety concerns, we still were operating safely. It's just some of the small things like wearing goggles when you're taking supports off of a 3D print, those small things. Those are things that didn't always happen consistently.
And then last,
so
but
sorry.
sorry, go ahead, Joe.
Go ahead, Adam. After you.
Okay, no worries. All right. So I was just gonna say last but not least, going forward. So we did miss a few things, but I think we're caught up now. We know where we are. The new model that we have is working, as Eric said, we're going to continue to evaluate. But we really want to envision this new makerspace and this new model as serving a student-centered creative outlet. We want repeat visits. We want people to come in and make it their space. We want people to live in that makerspace and use the tech. So we certainly do want to keep up those class integrated visits or class mandated visits, if you will, the way it's phrased here. But I like having students come in and do things for courses as well. But we really want it to become a catch-all space of inquiry for everybody. So that is, I think, well on its way to becoming a reality. And then we want to be better integrated with campus culture and organizations. With those on-demand projects that we've done, those have been very helpful in getting people excited and coming into the space, different organizations. So things, different student clubs, Greek life, those kinds of things. And that opens us to a wider user base than maybe the students who are just having to come there for a class. I have to make XYZ for this class or a specific discipline of students. It's not just the physics at Makerspace, right? Or whatever. We want to make sure that it is integrated throughout campus life. So those are our long-term goals and where we see ourselves. And I believe we have some another slide for questions and answers, but I will turn it back over to Joe if you had anything you wanted to add. Sorry, I cut you off there.
Totally fine. I was just going to add in that, as part of that too, it's important for the Makerspace librarian to go out there and to meet people where they are, right? They may not come directly to the makerspace. So just as you would liaise, with different colleges or different departments, do the same thing with those groups. Go to their meetings, go to the Greek life meetings, go to the global outreach meetings, go to meet the student clubs and put a face to the makerspace so that they can recognize somebody and maybe feel more comfortable coming in or working with us. And that's all I have.
All right. And with that, we will turn it over for questions. I know we're running very short on time, but does anybody have any questions? Feel free to type anything in the chat or unmute yourself.
You can unmute yourself now. We only have time for like one or two.
We'll also take accusations and judgments if you'd rather throw those in.
And if there are no questions, I'll just kind of end things too, just by saying our contact information is on this slide. Please do feel free to get in touch with any of us if you have questions about anything. If you want to see an overview of what we have in the space again, or how we're kind of divvying out workshops or doing the request process, those kinds of things, you can find links to all of that on the Makerspace website, which is just libraries.coastal.edu/makerspace. So feel free to check us out there too. And hopefully this has given you all some ideas. So, yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much. We're so happy you came. And with no other questions, feel free to email, like I said, if you need to, but we'll go ahead and adjourn. Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
everyone.